Hello, this is a comparison between the web browsers Servo and Ladybird at the state that they are when Servo version 0.0.1 has been released, which is mid-October 2025. These efforts, Servo and Ladybird, are creating independently, independent from other web browsers engines, a web browser engine, so it can render web pages, HTTPS, CSS, and all of the other HTTPS web browser technologies, I know, Canvas, WebGL, web fonts, etc. And then on top of that web browser rendering control, they also provide a web browser. The web browser might not be as advanced because they're focusing on the web rendering engine first. Web rendering engine also encompasses JavaScript. The aim is to display the web pages as correctly as possible, and also the behavior inside the web page should be correct, like animations, mouse hovers, mouse cursors, everything. We have in the right half of the screen Ladybird and in the left half of the screen Servo. Fresh installed, fresh source code running. This is how the default web browsers look like. There's tabs at the top. In Ladybird and the URL bar at the top in Servo. The menu bar is not shown by default in Ladybird. I have enabled it. This is how it looks like by default in Ladybird. There's a hamburger menu and you can enable the main menu. You can see that this web browser has been used a lot by the developers. Whereas in Servo, you can see that developers are straight up running maybe just the rendering engine, not actually the shell, the web browser, the default implementation for a web browser for Servo. Okay, so let's see how I got here, how I built, installed, and I'm running the two web browsers. For Ladybird, I couldn't find pre-built binaries from the Ladybird project, so I needed to build from scratch, from source. This means that I need to git clone the GitHub Git repository. I need to install a number of binary packages on my Linux operating system such that I have build dependencies, and then I'm building the Ladybird web browser, whereas Servo version 0.0.1 provides a binary tarball archive with binary such that we can run the Servo web browser and web engine without needing to compile anything. Ladybird I have built inside a Docker container. So building Ladybird web browser continues. We have installed the needed dependencies. We are in Arch Linux operating system. I've installed all of these packages. And then in order to build the web browser Ladybird, we need to run one command line, which is this thing. I git cloned the github.com/ladybird browser/ladybird git repository, changed into that directory, and then I have run this command. And this takes care of if you have all of the needed dependencies installed, the packages that I have installed for Arch Linux, then it will set up vc-pkg, which is a package manager for C++, and will start installing compiling from source and installing many dependencies. So image libraries, PNG, crypto libraries, OpenSSL, Google Skia, Google Highway, ICU for Unicode internationalization, fonts, font config, compression ba2eb6c4, automake, gperf, etc. After that, it started building the libraries from inside the Git repository Ladybird. Says 3,400 C++ translation units to compile. So building Ladybird web browser finished. The application the web browser has started. So I searched on Google for Ladybird. This is the web page, ladybird.org. It's a general description of the effort. They're building a web browser control and a web browser. 8 full-time employees, sponsors, and the tiering of sponsors. The platinum sponsors, $1,000 each, and there's 3 of them. And there's no download button. So I got to the get the code button, which takes you to the GitHub Git repository, github.com/ladybird browser/ladybird. And there's build instructions. How do I build and run this? See build instructions. And then for your Linux operating system, there will be special installation instructions. This is for our case, Arch Linux. And then I have run the command line that builds and starts the web browser. Next up, let's install the Servo version 0.0.1 web browser. So I searched on Google for Servo 0.0.1. I got to this blog post. This is an important milestone for the effort. So Servo is a HTML rendering engine plus a web browser application written in the Rust programming language, whereas Ladybird is written mostly in the C++ programming language. But both are really fresh efforts from the ground up to build new web browser engines and new web browsers that do not depend on the existing known web browser engines. So the Gecko from Mozilla, Firefox, Blink from Google Chrome Chromium, and WebKit from the Apple Safari web browser. There's a download page. Let's go to Linux x64. It's a file with extension tar.gzip. Let's extract the archive. So inside there's a directory called Servo, and there's an executable. We can see that it's executable. Let's double click on it. It didn't start. Let's open a terminal in this directory and see maybe it needs additional binary packages to be installed. Yeah, so it says that it needs more GStreamer libraries. Okay, so this Linux operating system is Kubuntu 25.10. When we know the name of the file that we need, we want to ask the package manager what is the deb package that's available in the deb repositories from Ubuntu that contains this file. The job for this is for the binary package apt file. So let's do that. Apt install apt file. Apt file update. And apt file search and then the name of the file that's missing. This package is not installed, so let's install it. And let's try to run Servo again. This time it managed to start correctly. So now we have the two web browsers. Let's put them side by side and see the quality of how they render web pages. We're not really interested in how the web browser application looks or what features it has. We're at a stage where better HTML rendering is more important than to have tabs and tab groups and search bars and a complete URL bar, etc. Control T, Control T. Okay, so I have clicked on the URL bar on Ladybird and it doesn't automatically select the text, which is a missing feature. Whereas in Servo, when I click in the URL bar, it automatically selects everything such that I can start writing. The namespace is servo colon versus about colon. So about dot new tab and servo colon new tab. Let's see how the Servo web page looks like. In Ladybird, you can reorder tabs. In Servo, you cannot. In Ladybird, the back, forward, refresh, address bar are below the tab, so are part of one tab. Whereas in Servo, this main toolbar is outside of the tabs, above the tabs. You can see that there is a connection and the URL bar knows which tab is currently selected, but still the URL bar is at the top and it should be part of the tab. It should be immediately easy to see that when we change the tab, we get a fresh instance of the URL bar. Okay, so something's wrong with this image in Ladybird. It's not a circle. Right click, there's no right click in Servo. There is a context menu in Ladybird. Open in new tab. Okay. Middle click. If I press the scroll button on my mouse, which is middle click, it will close the tab in both web browsers, Servo and Ladybird. I can select text in Ladybird. I cannot select text in Servo. Fonts look similar. You can see that web fonts have been applied to this text. Right click, view source. Shows the entire source of the web page. So this is probably, I'm guessing, the initial source of the page, not the current source of the page, or whatever, the current outer HTML of the entire DOM, document object model. Effects when you hover on the buttons. The URL that you are going to navigate to is being shown at the bottom left of the web browser in here in Ladybird. The same thing in Servo. Clicking on Servo, in this case, has opened a new tab. The same in Ladybird. Okay. There's very different rendering of this page, https://opencollective.com/servo. In the two web browsers, Servo and Ladybird. There's this background image here with bubbles, which we cannot see in Servo. We can see it in Ladybird. The main menu looks different. The sign in button looks like a button because it has this rounded rectangle around it in Ladybird, whereas the rounded rectangle is missing in Servo. Also, the fonts are probably wrong because in Ladybird have serif, so I'm going to guess that this is the correct font, whereas in Servo the uppercase I is just a straight line without serifs. So I'm going to guess that all of the letters which are part of the main menu have correct fonts and positioning in Ladybird and not in Servo. Okay, this text is truncated or image. So right click, open a new tab. Okay, let's look at the main menu. So if I hover on the main menu, it shows the sub items. The text is centered. But then Servo shows a rounded rectangle gray around the main menu item, whereas Ladybird doesn't show it. So I'm going to guess that this rounded rectangle should exist and be shown also on Ladybird. How do we zoom? What is this button? Enable experimental preferences. Okay, so the shell of the demo web browser Servo seems to be way more limited than the Ladybird web browser. So you cannot select text. There's no context menu inside the web content renderer, but also no context menu anywhere, not even in the address bar. Whereas we have context menu in Ladybird for the tabs, for the address bar, for the main HTML content, and correct one in the sense that it's going to be different context menus on different parts of the HTML content. Take screenshot. So links have context menu open in new tab and copy link address. And then this is the general context menu that you get. Go back, go forward, reload. Copy, paste, select all, and select all works. Taking screenshots of the visible space or the full page and view source. About : src doc. And we have probably locked up Ladybird. Unquote exception at type error. Okay, so these are the consoles. We have started both web browsers from the command line /servo on the right half of the screen in console, and then Ladybird on the left half of the screen. Let's always have Servo on the left half of the screen. Vulkan. Let's see if we manage to unblock Ladybird. We're not going to be able to. Terminate. Okay, so the same command line is both for building and running the application. If the application is already built and installed correctly, the Ladybird web browser and all of its dependencies, then Ladybird web browser will just start. Copy paste from the URL bar in Servo does work. So Control A, Control C do work. Control X does work. Control Z does work. The mouse cursors are not okay in Ladybird. In Ladybird, the mouse cursors are probably the ones that are built into Ladybird, and they do not respect the settings that I have in my desktop environment. So this is the finger URL cursor. This is the text selection cursor. So this is the, in Servo you can see the cursors images for the that have been configured inside my desktop environment inside KDE Plasma. The balance looks better on Servo. So the blue bar is not similar in the two web browsers. So I'm going to guess that the Servo one is better because this vertical bar looks correct, whereas this one is probably too dark. And then the texts are on top of each other. So today's balance is behind and estimated annual budget is on top of today's balance inside Ladybird. But the texts are placed correctly in Servo. I'm not sure why the tooltips look different. The fonts look smaller in Ladybird. Maybe I need to increase the zoom level. Zoom plus. The fonts are take less width in Ladybird and are wider in Servo. Okay, let's see this hover effect. Seems to work correct in both web browsers. This scroll bar, I'm not sure what's left-right scroll bar. It doesn't work. Let's reset the zoom level. Okay, so if we're using the default zoom level, then these three cards are visible entirely. So maybe this left-right scroll bar should not exist. The placing of text inside this rounded rectangle looks better on Ladybird. On Servo, the text is too close to the up margin of the rounded rectangle. So it's not centered vertically. This looks similar. The budget. Okay, something's not okay with the fact that you cannot see the entire text, so it didn't text wrap here. The Servo project is excited to S. Read more. View all updates is missing this icon, which is probably a, I don't know, a font in Ladybird. So you can see a font missing placeholder, just a rectangle. Whereas in here in Servo, you can see the actual font, the right arrow. Also, the effect when you click is a bit different. The positioning of this one is different between Servo and Ladybird. Probably wrong on Ladybird and probably wrong on Servo. This not great vertical centering of the 1 number related to the text page and of 1. This bit of dynamic effect. It is probably more correct on Servo than on Ladybird. In Ladybird, you can see for a second as an artifact these icons at the right margin of the web browser when you close this menu in here near the scroll bar. And it's more fluid in Servo and seems to be what the web developer has intended. So it just slides from the right to the left towards the left. Nothing else. Whereas in Ladybird, the entire main menu moves down a bit. So it moves from here to here, the main menu. And the way it slides is too instant from the right towards the left. The fonts don't look great on Servo. O is almost touching N. S is missing pixels. O very close to U. R is missing pixels. The fonts look okay in Ladybird for these text updates on our activities and progress. These fonts also look correct in the sense that probably web developers want pages to look like this, very fancy, not like this random with random spacing between letters. This is the progress bar shown between the main toolbar and the actual content of the page. I'm not sure if navigating back works in Ladybird. Control T, so the entire web browser has probably locked again. Bindings error for scripting too much recursion. So a JavaScript error. The web browser is in a locked state. It couldn't even open a new web browser window. I tried to open a new tab and I managed to open it. Let's see if I manage to paste. Yeah, so one of the most important features when you do a web browser from scratch is to make it as fail-safe as possible and making sure that if one tab crashes, doesn't crash the entire web browser or the other tabs is one of the first features that you want to implement, even if you implement them in a very, very naive fashion. So multi-process and one process per tab seems like something that you want to aim for very, very soon when you start developing a web browser. Report issues. Wow, the GitHub logon page looks really, really okay. Did not expect this. Let's see how I can navigate to github.com. GStream installation is missing a plugin. The plugin GST decode bin. No suitable plugins found for Servo. And for the Ladybird web browser, doesn't say anything interesting. Refusing to run script because it has already started. Let's have everything running side by side, both the terminals and the graphical user interface applications. Okay, GitHub and modern web pages such as the instant messaging applications and social media applications and YouTube and etc. I don't really expect that they work perfectly. I would expect more classic web pages with fewer JavaScript items to work increasingly better, and then have tables, divs, AC3 compliance, etc. The very complex modern websites are going to be among the last to be implemented correctly because they require everything. They require WAuth fonts, they require minified JSON, they require SVG inline, they require canvas, they require HTML5 video, they require everything. I tried to navigate to fsf.org and Ladybird all of a sudden just loaded github.com. fsf.org. So Servo did not know to put three W's in front of the URL. Hopefully that's the error. fsf.org. Okay, so Servo shows error could not load the requested page. Whereas Ladybird managed to load the page, the main menu looks acceptable. Probably not how the web developers have intended, because this rectangle with background red doesn't look correct on the search item. And it's probably too tall on the rest of the items. Okay. Let's see, can we see images somehow? Just links. PNG. It doesn't do line wrap, which I don't like, the view source inside Ladybird. This is how images are presented in the two web browsers. Ladybird shows the image centered and with a dark background. Servo shows the image on the top left with a white background. Let's see Wikipedia. So I wrote Wikipedia. And there's search implemented in the address bar in Servo, takes you to DuckDuckGo. It just refreshes the current web page in Ladybird. Wikipedia.org. Interesting. So Ladybird has been built inside a container, and probably that's why it doesn't see all of the fonts that are available on my host operating system. So we should probably stop and install all of the possible Noto fonts inside the Ladybird's container. How do we do that? Pacman -ss Noto. Pacman -s Noto. Sudo. So you must go Noto -fonts. Noto fonts CJK. Noto fonts emoji. Noto fonts extra. So let's start Ladybird again. Wikipedia.org. And still no luck. Let's see a new tab, http forever.com without an S. Control TV. The website seems to load correctly and looks very similar in the two web browsers. Twitter looks really, really great. Accept all cookies. Retry. And including the favorite icon that's being shown in the tab. Let's see how an RSS feed looks like. The back button works. This is how URL underlines look like. So I'm going to guess that they look better in Servo than in Ladybird. The underline is too dark on Ladybird and too thick. Custom web fonts. Compressed width. This looks more natural compared to this. There's an effect when you hover on top of the 1 and the 2, but the effects behave differently in the two web browsers. It's more smooth in Servo and more abrupt in Ladybird. PNG. There's a search bar in Ladybird. Let's search. So Control F doesn't do anything interesting in Servo. Yeah, impressive, impressive. I totally would not have expected the two web browsers to work as well as they do. So they implement a ton of JavaScript. Yes, for PNGs and images in general, they reuse the existing standard open source libraries. The same for fonts and for web fonts. But still, there's impressive levels of functionality in the way web pages are rendered in the both engines and the web browsers. Let's see Wikipedia German. Control click. So click and control click. So I can open URLs in new tabs using control click in both web browsers. That's great. Okay, Servo doesn't show the hamburger menu icon, the search icon, and the link icon. Ladybird shows them. Ladybird is not showing enough pixels for this text, Abkürzung b:'G. More icons being shown correctly in Ladybird, this internationalization one, and the down arrow. Whereas the down arrow in Servo has a blue background. Scrolling with the mouse wheel works as expected. Not really. Down, up. Down, up. Oh, down, up. So scrolling doesn't work correctly in Ladybird. Down, up. Down, up. Scrolling does what I would expect in Servo. Down, up. Whereas it jumps in Ladybird. Okay, let's see these huge pop-ups. So in Servo just shows the pop-up as the web page once, whereas in Ladybird shows the pop-up but also shows this tooltip, the native Ladybird tooltip, which is too much. One tooltip is enough. Technikgeschichte. Wow, wow. Super advanced functionality. Yeah. So Servo did the 0.0.1 release, which is a milestone in the alphas, probably, which means it's ready for a bit of public consumption, whereas Ladybird wants to do a alpha release next year, 2026. Schreib Wettbewerb. Incredibly functional, both web browsers. Okay, text hidden by other text. So the layout is better for this part, Ursprung, bearbeiten in Ladybird, and is not great in Servo. Servo doesn't show the scroll bar for some reason, whereas it's always visible in Ladybird. Right-clicking on the scroll bar navigates, left-clicking on the scroll bar navigates, middle-clicking on the scroll bar navigates. How do we do something similar in Servo? We don't. Let's see a Wikipedia image. Copy paste. What are we seeing here? Oh, SVG. Control C, Control V, Enter. This slash is missing some pixels. These fonts look more professional, 3/48. This looks just like a sketch, very few pixels. More buttons visible in Ladybird. The right arrow and full screen and close, download, and what is this? Einbetten. Let's see. Well, they're all visible, but wrong color, so it's dark on dark in Servo. It's interesting how the buttons are not visible in both web browsers. Not enough width. Okay. Ladybird shows a ton of tooltips. Vele. I'm not sure where that tooltip comes from. It's the same tooltip on both buttons. How do we close this thing? Forward. Okay, let's go next. Next. I'm not sure if this graying out should happen. Yeah, I'm going to guess that this text should not have gray on top. Very, very impressive what I'm seeing here. They both display SVG. I'm not sure. Let's prove that thing. How do we see the source? Show menu bar. Oh. I'm not sure if this is a PNG or an actual SVG. Let's prove. Yeah, it's actual SVG created in Inkscape. Great. So there's an SVG rendering engine in both Servo and Ladybird, and probably written from scratch, like Servo and in general the Rust programming language effort from Mozilla has created a rendering engine for SVGs, or are they using librxml or SVG from the GNOME project? I cannot scroll in SVGs in Ladybird. I can scroll in SVGs in Servo. Missing or not? favorite icon for this SVG. The favorite icon for Wikipedia looks incorrect. It's too thin, it's too pixelated in Servo, and looks correct in Ladybird. Okay, how do we close this thing? This pop-up, not model enough. You can still do actions on the page that's behind the model pop-up. You need to click outside the pop-up, but not on the right arrow. Right click, copy, Ctrl T, V. Ctrl T, V doesn't work, and it should be a priority. Why would you open a new tab and not be able to paste a URL? Historial. Wow. So clicking on the radio button does not work in Ladybird for the history of Wikipedia, whereas clicking on the same radio button does work correctly in Servo. But then somehow the Ladybird's rendering of the Wikipedia history seems to be a bit better. Comparar. Let's see this instant checkbox. They render differently. There's this white line inside. In Servo, that's not shown in Ladybird. But the Ladybird rendering of this instant apply checkbox seems to be correct. Hard to tell. Vinilo. Okay, this bookmark, this tool that takes you to referencias, is probably not placed correctly in Ladybird. It should be towards the top. So superscript, not in line with the text, not at the same height as Vinilo. The keyboard keys, home, and work correctly in both web browsers. Space doesn't work. It should do page down. Something's wrong with the way these two logos are being displayed, a Wikimedia project and powered by MediaWiki in Ladybird. they're shown correctly or better in Servo. Versión para móviles. Africanas. DuckDuckGo.com. Wrong favorite icon inside the tab. It's probably the correct image, but there's not enough room for, I don't know, 16 by 16 or how many pixels these things should have. So seems like it's stretched. It's shown on 14 by 14 pixels, a 16 by 16 pixels image. Add extension. Wow. Somehow DuckDuckGo.com thinks that Servo is Firefox because it offers to install the addons.mozilla.org/firefox add-on XPI file. I'm not sure what color should this icon have, whether black or white. I'm going to guess white looks better. Something's wrong with this image. Not displayed on Servo, but displayed on Ladybird. Open image in new tab, a very good feature to have. Copy, Control D, Control L, Control V. So Control L works correctly, goes to the address bar, the URL bar in both web browsers. Great. Not shown correctly icon, this exclamation mark in Servo, and doesn't display the page title Servo for DuckDuckGo.com, where is shown correctly the page title in the web browser Ladybird. The Mac icon is not shown. Maybe we need to refresh Servo. Yeah, refresh fixed the issue in Servo. Something's wrong with the way this image is being shown. It's too pixelated on Ladybird. Application error. A client-side exception has occurred while loading DuckDuckGo.com. e.animate is not a function. Let's see kernel.org. Control L, Control C, Control L, Control V. Stable changelog. The fonts are darker on Servo. Maybe it's respecting the fact that I have selected in the in my desktop environment that I want free type, full hinting. Ladybird has a disadvantage that it's not running inside the host operating system, but it's running inside the container. In order not to mess up with my system to install all sorts of dependencies that are needed by Ladybird, I have actually built Ladybird inside a Podman container. And inside the Podman container, we have Arch Linux, a Linux container. HTTP pub. So listing of HTTP, FTP-like sites works correctly in both web browsers. And both web browsers are way more advanced than a ton of mainstream web browsers because they support the latest and greatest HTTPS cryptography. Like if you're using an older operating system that has, I know, the Internet Explorer web browser that you have by default in Windows 7, that has way too old cryptography and will not be able to navigate to HTTPS sites. So I didn't encounter any HTTPS cryptography, SSL, TLS, HTTPS certificates issues yet. I have managed to lock Ladybird again. Let's try to restart it. I'm testing the Reddit website, the way it's being rendered. Unhandled JavaScript exception. But loading continues. Too many requests. Okay, so both web browsers did render ready.com. We're at the subreddit for the Servo web browser. The vertical layout is not great in here inside the search box. There's a number of pixels between the search box and this horizontal line, whereas the search box touches the horizontal line in Ladybird. So I'm going to guess that Servo renders the search bar in Reddit better. This image is still not a circle. Maybe that's why fonts are squished in Ladybird, are not wide enough, because also images sometimes get to be squished. Best, the text best is not visible or not shown. The combo box doesn't work. I want to switch from the best view to the new view in Ladybird. I cannot because I cannot see the context menu, the pop-up menu. I can switch to new in Servo. Let's write new by hand in the URL bar. Okay, I needed to reload the Servo page by clicking on the URL bar and then pressing enter. So let's see, 21 hours ago, this is cool. Servo 0.0.1 released. Let's read the blog article. Control click doesn't do anything. Control click does what it should. Context menu doesn't work in Ladybird. Maybe this tab is compromised. ba2eb chat. What is that? Click. Whoa. Something's happening in Servo. Okay, so for servo.ba2ebchat.com, Ladybird seems to be better, but things look grayed out. Servo is dancing all everywhere, left, right. Content is being shown and moved around. And now I right click, started working again on the tab with Reddit and Servo. Okay. Yeah. So both web browsers have a ton of human power behind them. Ladybird has at least 8 full-time developers, and that can be seen. There's a large number of Git commits per day, and very complicated C++ Git commits at that. And Servo, I'm going to guess it's also actively developed by either full-time employees or by part-time paid employees. I'm trying to get to DuckDuckGo. And one web browser has crashed. Servo. Right-clicking doesn't work correctly on the text that's selected inside the URL bar in Ladybird. Right now it works, but I'm not sure. So sometimes you can, if you right-click on the text that's selected inside the Ladybird URL bar, it says that it cannot copy. Okay, let's search for the ACID 3 test. You should not see this at all. Wow. 83 out of 100 and 93 out of 100 from ACID 3 test. reference rendering. So let's compare the URL is not shown correctly, or it's now. Yeah, so this should be blue, like this. The font is not flown correctly, and the final page has on Ladybird. So the text on the second line should end at has, not at to. No, to. Wow. Something's happening. There's different widths reported by the web browsers, or I'm not sure why the reference rendering ends with has to and ends with has in Ladybird versus Servo. And this should be a PNG, should not be an HTML. Let's see if I'm clicking and closing all of the tabs. What happens? It closes the web browser. Both web browsers behave the same. So if I close the only existing web browser tab, it closes the entire web browser process. Let's try to load the Zoom web page, which is zoom probably.us. Well, something's happening in Ladybird, probably the cookies pop-up menu. Well, this should be it. This is a comparison between the current status of Ladybird and Servo at the time when Servo version 0.0.1 has been released. Thank you.